Hi, I'm Francesca, and thanks for joining today's Treadmill Treats. So, today I want to talk to you about being blinded by the money. Today on social media, there's so many people out there. They're fronting, they're showing, oh, look at all the money I have, look at my fancy pocketbooks, look at, the big house that I live in. And, so much of social media is fake. Let's be real. I always say I'm not Willy Wonka, and I don't sugarcoat shit. So let's be real. Most of these people have bill collectors, knocking on their doors, or they're parking their cars around the block so they don't get them repossessed. A lot of people are just fronting, showing, oh, I have this, and look, I get it. I grew up poor. I was on the wrong side of the tracks. My mother was a waitress. We were poor, and I wanted the good life. I wanted, to travel and have the big house and have all these things I didn't grow up with. And so when I, met my ex-husband, and, he provided all of these things, I just thought, wow, this is great. And now, I finally made it. And, we had all these toys and big vacations and lots of money. And I thought, wow, this is great, until you have to pay the piper, until there's a catch to all of this. And so my catch was being verbally abused for 24 years. Hey, we're going to give you this big lifestyle, but the catch is we're going to sell it. We're going to take your soul, okay? And you're not going to be your own person. And that was the catch. And so having all of this money was great, except every night I was in my bathtub crying. I cried myself to sleep every single night. So was it worth it? No, it wasn't worth it to me. In fact, in the end, I walked away with nothing, and I said, you know what? I want to be free. And if I have to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with my kids for the rest of my life, that's the price of my freedom. And I'm okay with that. The stuff didn't mean as much anymore because it had no value for me, because I was so miserable. And so selling my soul for the stuff, it just, for me, wasn't worth it. And, I know that a lot of people are out there, saying, oh, look at this, look at me, and, I want to see how many likes I can get, or, and that gives you validation. And really, you need to find validation in yourself. And, what I learned, from all of this is that I learned that I had to, like myself. I had to love myself. I had to learn how to, to be okay with myself, with just me, not what I had, or not what, society thought, I was the perfect wife, or the perfect house, or the perfect kids, or the perfect marriage. None of that mattered. It was, how did I feel about myself, and, what did I want to leave? What did I want to leave my legacy to be, not my stuff. It's, who I was as a person, how kind I was, what I did for others. That's my legacy I want to leave to my girls. And I just think that sometimes, especially anymore, we just get so blinded by wanting to be, perfect, like everybody we see on social media, or, the housewives of Who Gives a Shit, how, they have these rich lives, but look at them, they're miserable, they're fighting with each other, the women hate each other, and they call each other, is this what you want? I mean, that's not what I want. And hey, look, if that's what you want, do you, boo? I'm all for everybody should do their own thing. I'm just saying, for me, I don't want to be that. I want to have peace. I want to, I want to be that woman that inspires other women, and to be that woman that helps, fix another woman's crown. I want to be that person. I don't want to be a backstabbing, lying bitch, that so many women are out here today doing, and posting it on social media, no less. You need to just find yourself. You need to just own your worth and know who you are, and that's the only way you can change. Find the lesson in it and change. So my message today is, own yourself and own your worth, and be a kind person. We need more kindness in the world. So that's my message. And thanks for joining me. Check me out on all social media at Treadmill Treats.